Hi, creeps and freaks.
Creepies and freakies.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Courtney.
And we are In the Nick of Crime. We come to you weekly with true crime, some spooks,
and a little bit of comedy.
We focus on being a voice for victims.
But we also like to rake the offenders through the coals.
We can never really seem to take ourselves too seriously, but we do hope you'll join us.
So keep it creepy and stay freaky.
And we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
The subject of today's episode is a historical figure that, along with being a nobleman, a friend of Joan of Arc, a knight, a baron, a marshal, and one of the richest men in France at the time, he may have also been the world's very first, or at least the very first we know of, serial killer. From a boy that lost his parents and was raised by a less than attentive grandfather, to a warrior that helped save France from the English, to a spendthrift that wastes away almost all his fortune, to an alchemist, accused occultist, and a fiend that murdered anywhere between 40 and 800 children, probably closer to 60, we'll discuss the rise and fall of one of the most sadistic men to ever live, if in fact he did any of the crimes of which he is accused. The supposed inspiration for the story of Bluebeard. Today we cover Gilles de Rais. I'm Kevin Young.
And I'm Dan Horrigan.
And this is Torture. All right.
Sorry, so 800 kids.
Okay, so we'll
1960. That's a big gap.
Yeah, it's a huge span. We'll get into the actual crimes and how many, around about how many there were. There were not 800. Some people, 600 to 800 kids. There were not 600 to 800 kids murdered by Gilles de Rais. Let's get that straight right now. Those are people that want to kind of shock you for value or whatever. It's not, and it's probably not. It's probably not even into the hundreds, even though a lot of people are like, "Oh, it was 140." It's like, there's first off, there's not a lot of evidence for the 40 to 60 in the first place. Definitely no evidence for the 140. So, but we'll get all into that. This is gonna be a long one for all you guys, just so you know. I could have broken it into 2 episodes. But then the first episode would have just been like his early life, and it would have been kind of fucking boring. Nothing what this show's supposed to be. So we're doing his whole life story in one shot, and hopefully you can all stick with us. Happy New Year to everyone. Happy New Year, Dan. I hope you had a
Happy New Year.
Good one. We're actually recording this on New Year's Day.
Very quiet one, which is the way we were supposed to. Originally, the plan was I was going to go to my mother's house, and Alison was going to see her mother and family. We're going to separate for New Year's, and then there was COVID in the family houses, so that was out the window. So we sat around last night. We watched the new Knives Out Glass Onion film.
We haven't watched it yet. Is it good? You like it?
It's good. It's good. It's not like, I don't want to go. Okay, it's not as patch obviously in the first one, but it's really good. I've been honest with you. I also actually think it's one of those things. If it wasn't a Knives Out thing, it was its own thing, I think it kind of appreciate it for what it is more. I think it was just super high expectations going in compared to the first one.
Yeah, the first one you didn't know what to expect when you went into it. It ended up being fucking amazing. So. Yeah, and it's fantastic. Like it's completely separate style of thing as well, which is great. It's very well done. That's good. Yeah. We stayed in. We were supposed to go to the in-laws, couldn't go, and we stayed in and did a family D&D night.
I saw that.
The wife and I were both. It was a real. I'll get into this real quick. It was supposed to be a real quick one shot. Like, this is a 2-hour game. You play it, boom, you're done, just to introduce everybody. We played a 2-hour fucking game for 4.5 goddamn hours because kids.
That's nothing.
Because kids are fucking horrible. No, it was supposed to be okay. You meet. We played this. It was the sheep one. If anybody knows. But you meet this sheep, you find out he's a wizard. You got to fight this small group of polymorphs and a half-orc in town. You beat them. You go to the tower. You beat the few guards that are out there. You take on the big bad. You get the wand, turn the guy back into a wizard. You're done. It's as simple as it can fucking be.
I was gonna say, but three fighting encounters like that in itself could take 2
But
hours.
That's
the problem.
But I knew it was going to be that way. And all of the people that you're fighting were like level 1 or level 2. So I had everybody make their character to level 4. So they should have just been able to blow past everybody.
Sneeze on them.
Yeah. And they did not. Everyone died. They lost. The big bad won in the end. They all fucking died. My wife died 3 times. She had to keep being brought back. It's like, what are you?
My God.
What are you doing?
Oh God.
Yeah, it was.
But look, after the time you guys were sitting there and you spent the best part of an hour contemplating turning on or off a light switch as you were afraid what it would do, it was in that moment I realized like that you don't plan in that way because those sort of things could happen.
I didn't go into it with a plan of getting some like, they'll do this and this. It's like, I have no idea what any of them were doing. My wife's never played before. My oldest stepson decided he wanted to play, so he was an addition. So they had 5 fucking people to defeat these small groups. And the first group, God, we're getting into it. I really don't have time. The first group, the first group that they took on, half of them ended up running away. Because if I didn't have them run away, we would still be playing the fucking game. It's ridiculous. Oh, and me and my wife were about at our wits' end, and finally I was just like, babe, I just have to kill you all because I can't handle it anymore. They're fucking killing me. They're driving me fucking crazy.
Just do what I did. Remember that session we did with the flashback train?
Yeah.
I think I must actually get the audio for that because that was a really cool session. But that was just completely ad-lib the entire thing. Like there was absolutely no plan going into that. I was like, right, I want to get these guys onto a train. That's all I knew. That's literally it going into it. It's like, get them onto a train.
Yeah.
Done.
All right. Let's just let everybody know. I don't have COVID, but I have a little bit of a chest cold. So if I'm coughing and wheezing or anything like that, that's why I apologize.
We have a little bit of a thing going here too, so I'm a little tiny bit sniffly. So.
All right, before we get started, I'd like to shout out Jay for his email. So with this show, we record, when we can. Sometimes it's a few days before we post. Sometimes it's weeks before we post. Jay had emailed us literally hours after we recorded our Christmas episode, and it was just too jam-packed with content, and we were all so busy with things that we couldn't get back together to shout him out. So we're going to do it now. So Jay writes, "Hey guys, I really like your show. You keep it fun and interesting at the same time. I hope this podcast is here to stay. Great so far. I've heard every episode, and I'm sure that will be the cause for as long as you guys keep making them. I hope you get a Patreon going soon. Keep up the interesting work. Thanks. Thumbs up emoji." Jay, we also hope to continue making this show for a long time, and we plan on having a Patreon up very soon. It'll all start with the song Dan still has to write.
Yeah, just been busy. But see, that's the Phil Better school of call to arms right there. Email us, everybody. Is there one call to arms? Email us.
Thank you for your email. If you would like to email or review or DM, we'll read it on the show. Or just get in contact with us. If you don't want it read on the show, just say so, and we won't. That's easy. And actually, I was going to change our call to action this episode, since we did email last time. I want people to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. So the reason for this, you might not think that it helps us. It's like, I'll rate and review, that's just for whatever. But it really, really does, because Apple is one of the top podcast platforms in the world, right after Spotify now, I think, because of Joe Rogan. But they use their rating and reviews and subscription numbers to decide what podcast gets featured and which ones get pulled up first when you search. Having a higher rating and more reviews gets us found easier. Getting found easier gets us more subscribers. More subscribers means advertisers. Advertisers means money to make the show better. Making the show better means we get picked up by a big network or can create our own. Network money means maybe live shows someday. So if you would like to see Dan's beautiful Irish face mere inches away from you, screaming, "Sort your fucking life," go rate and review on Apple. The first 100 will get a shout out on the show.
God damn it, I have a catchphrase now.
Oh yeah, I've decided like a month ago that "sort your fucking life" is our is the catchphrase of the show.
Sweet. Well, I don't think, again, back to the Pepsi Jet competition, you can't make promises you can't keep. So if you do not find me beautiful, if when you see my face, you can hold Kevin responsible for putting that idea in your head.
The whole script is filled with asterisks and footnotes about how none of this is real. We are just joking. Don't take it seriously.
Well, I am pretty beautiful. But
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. You're pretty pretty yourself, Kevin.
Yeah, I try.
Thank you.
All right, so our main source material is Bluebeard, The Life and Crimes of Gilles de Rais by Leonard Wolfe. There'll be a few other that, again, it'll be at the show notes. So let's get started with that. The story of Bluebeard and how it kind of fits into Gilles de Rais. So I'll let Dan, you have that. I'll let you go ahead and tell everybody what that.
Before I actually start, if you want to hear a slightly more professional way of this done, there's a 15-minute long video you can find online, but you should listen to this one. The guy sounds like a complete creep that's reading it, but it's fantastic. It's by the Reader Reads YouTube channel, but this is a bit of a more of an abridged version. So once upon a time, there was this guy who was as rich could be. Basically, he had mansions, townhouses, chests full of gold, and everything that a young little gold digger could ever want, except for one thing: he didn't have good looks. He was trying his hand with his neighbor's daughters for some time, but with all the money in the world, none of them found him attractive because he had a blue beard, which is a fairly mean thing as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, so he did what any self-respecting rich asshole would do, and that won't take no for an answer. And he whisked them all off to one of his many estates deep in the woods for a week to party and get fucked up and be merry. During this week-long drinking session, the youngest of the daughters came to realize that this super rich guy might actually be pretty decent looking, Bluebeard or not, and that she actually seemed to come to like him. Money, money, money. Drink, drink, drink. Drugs, drugs, drugs. So they married as soon as they returned home. She moved into one of his numerous houses / castles with him. Suddenly, he dropped the bombshell that he had to go out of town for business. Good old Bluebeard Corporation can't run itself, and he had some shady business deal to conclude with the Russians. That's my guess as to what he was
probably
up to.
Russians. It's usually Russians.
Yep. So he said he wouldn't be back for at least 6 weeks or so, and he gave her the keys to everything in the castle, except he told his wife. He told his wife that she can throw a complete and utter rager with all of her friends while he's gone. But the only thing she wasn't allowed to do was go into the little room in the back that he keeps locked up. And she said that if she did go near that room, he would literally kill her. So he headed on out of there. She threw her party, and in the middle of it all, she said, "Fuck it." That's actually a direct quote, as far as I'm concerned. And she opened the door that she wasn't supposed to open. She walked inside, and she discovered hanging on the walls were the decapitated bodies of numerous women, all of the old Mr. Double B's previous wives. In fright, she dropped the key into a pool of blood that was sitting on the floor. She picked him up and ran away. Now, I know this is a bit of a fable-y backstory thing, but yeah. I'm finding issues with consistency and plot holes here. Is how old were those bodies, or how fresh were those bodies? There was a pool of blood on the floor. So Mr. Double B returns anyway early and asks his wife the next morning, "So what did you get up to?" And she said she threw the rager and basically lied about not going near the room and gave him back the keys. She didn't return the key to the little room, and he said, "Hey, where's the key to the little room?" She goes, "Oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, let me go fetch it for you. And I gave it to him, and he saw there was blood on there. Now, according to the original fable, the reason that the blood was still there, it was that it was enchanted and she couldn't get the blood off. So he immediately knew that she lied, and he told her that she had a quarter of an hour to prepare, because then he was going to kill her. She begged, and he said, "Nah, sorry, love. It's decapitationsville for you, baby. Now, get going, get ready, get your prayers done." There's a very short version of the next bit, is that she kept putting off coming down because she had her sister do a Mission Impossible and climb her way up the castle tower to watch out for her brothers. Who her brothers were due to arrive for a visit that day, and they eventually appeared. So in the original story I was listening to, and the bits that I read up and everything, she asks him to put off about 6 times. Hey, just give me 1 more minute. And he's like, oh, no,
Are you going to come down so I can kill you already?
Yeah.
In a minute.
Yeah. And another thing I read was that apparently the excuse was more that she was saying she's putting on a wedding dress. And apparently it was the thing of the time that you'd be buried in your wedding dress. So it was befitting then that she would be killed to be buried in the wedding dress.
Thing at the time, if you're going to be murdered by your husband, you got to wear your wedding dress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So eventually the brothers that were due to arrive appeared in the distance, and she coaxed another quarter of an hour out of Double B. And to give them time to arrive, she headed downstairs, and good old Mr. Beard said, "Right, so how about you?" And just as he was about to chop her head off, her brothers swooped in like the Power Rangers. They kicked his ass, stabbed him a bunch of times, and he died, and she inherited everything. She married some guy. She married her sister off to some other guy. She bought some military things for her brothers because they were both soldiers, and basically she paid for them to move up the ranks or something. Yeah. And the life lesson learned in all this is that if your man tells you to not open his death dungeon door, then you don't open your death dungeon door.
Yeah, ladies, if there's a room in your house you're not allowed to go into, that's a red flag.
Yeah. Then just don't go into it. Just
no, don't get out of the fucking house. There's something in there that you're not. Get the fuck out of the house. Leave. That's
it reminded me immediately reminded me of the first serial killer in Skyrim. Did you ever read about that? When Skyrim first came out, there's a whole thing. I think PC World did a write up on it where there's this whole thing. The guy uploaded footage where he was a serial killer, where he would go out and he would literally marry people. And nobody can marry people in the game, and then he would kill them and decapitate them, and he would hang their bodies on the wall inside his house. And then he would get married, and the women would move into the house as they do, and they would just be going around their daily business or whatever like that. And there's all these bodies hanging on the wall. And then he would just repeat, lather, rinse, repeat.
In the game.
In the game, yeah.
Not real life.
Yeah, so no, yeah. And like he had like their heads on shelves or something like that. And I was like, he was missing out, because like you marry a woman in that who runs a shop and you have money from her every day. Why would you kill her?
I don't know.
Yeah.
People do weird stuff. So the story of Bluebeard is very loosely based on Gilles de Rais, supposedly. If you want to change children to wives and keeping the bodies instead of keeping the heads. And honestly, there's very little correlation between the two, but somebody says that he is the inspiration. So there's the story. You're going to get a story of Gilles de Rais now, and you can make your own. You can have your own opinion on whether or not they are anything alike. I don't think they are. I think it's just like, oh, well, this is a killer and he's a killer, so they must have something to do with one another. But whatever.
No, you know. I've heard a couple of different versions of it too, and it's just one of these things where it's
I heard another one where there's like
story.
It's a witch. The woman is there's a witch that does it. Okay, whatever. But anyway, let's get to it, because again, we got a lot of shit to cover. So Gilles de Montmorency Laval was born to Guy II de Montmorency Laval and Marie de Craon, and it's not crayon, Craon, Crayon. Again, this is French. My favorite thing to try to pronounce if you haven't been following along. So it's going to be
James Crayola.
fun.
That's his name.
He was born in the family castle of Champossay-sur-de-Loire in 1404. I say like Ron Burgundy when someone put a question mark behind you, stay classy, San Diego. So listen, okay. They didn't keep very good records of birth.
I'm sorry,
back
you
then.
struggled more reading numbers than you did reading French words just there.
The
numbers weren't in French.
they didn't really need to keep good records of birth back then. Kids were pretty much seen as little adults. So when one was able-bodied enough, they were either put to work, sent to school, or sent to military training. This was about the middle of the 100 Years' War, so he's going to go to school and military training. 100 Years' War is actually a pretty significant role in the life of Gil. But pretty much the consensus is it was 1404, 1405, somewhere in between there. In fact, when we get to his brother, we have absolutely no idea when he was born. He was born either a couple years later or 10 years later, somewhere in that decade. His younger brother was born. And we only know this because of what happens to his mom. So, okay. Now, because of the marriage of his parents, the Montmorency Lavals, they were very rich and important landowners, but stayed mostly to the southern western part of the country with Nantes, the capital city of Brittany, near its center. I mean, they owned this whole big section of France. And Gil was, that was fairly common for the times with the ultra-wealthy, raised mostly by a wet nurse and rarely saw his parents. At some point, maybe a couple of years after his birth, maybe 10, like I had said, his brother René was born. They are not close. He will have very little to do with Gil's story until near the end, and even then, he's just kind of patched in there a little bit. So, when Gil's about 7, he will start his education and will develop a love of language, mostly Latin and the arts. It was said that he was, quote, a lord with a fine understanding, well-mannered, and one who had a fine appreciation for those who spoke elegant Latin. If only he had been able to moderate his desires, he may have become a hero. Which, he is kind of a little bit for a little bit of time, and then, not anymore, but we'll get more to that when we get to his military career.
They have very low expectations for heroes, I think. He likes Latin. If only he was...
Well,
a little bit better.
He's got a thing for fashion and design and art and the spoken word and the theater.
Right.
Kind of a quote unquote Renaissance man,
Imagine song playing in the background. I need a hero. It's like, well, I speak Latin. It's like, oh, there you are, hey baby.
As long as you're a little kid. We'll get part of that later. In about 14...
I take back my hey baby. I forgot he was a kid in the States.
But it's literally, hey baby.
Yeah.
So at about 14, 15, Gil's father would be out hunting when a wild boar he was in pursuit of would turn and gore him, leaving a fatal wound. He ended up dying from the infection that set in soon after. And it's said to have been a very painful death. It's kind of like King Robert from Game of Thrones.
I was going to say, Robert Baratheon.
That's exactly what I thought of. Robert Baratheon died the exact same way. It was fairly quick. But Gil didn't get to go say goodbye or anything. The story they kind of tell is that somebody came into his the room he was getting tutored in and told him when he was like between 7 and 10 years old or whatever.
Wonder if he has I wonder if he had a bastard blacksmith son that could be very heavily involved in the storyline if possible, but then you just decide no, let's just forget about him.
Yeah, put him on a boat and send him away until the last scene.
Yeah. Could make things very intriguing.
Maybe. Yeah.
But no.
Probably should have done more with that. So to add on to the tragedy, Gil's mother would either also pass away, possibly during childbirth with René, or she married Charles, the Lord of Villebon, after her husband's death and simply skipped town without her kids. It could be either one. Either way...
Sounds like something she'd do.
Yeah. We never hear from her. Well, once you find out about her father, she definitely could have done this. But either way, we never hear from her again. So she's completely out of the picture for the rest of his life. But thing to take into consideration now is within a year, Gil has lost both of his parents. All right, whether it's from death or abandonment. Now, Gil's father had it in his will that he and his brother were to be raised by a cousin that Guy had trusted. However, Jean de Cron, the boys' maternal grandfather, fought in court and got possession of Gilles and Rais. Now, don't get confused here. While Gilles is the subject of the episode, he is by no means the only villain. There will be plenty. Jean de Cron is simply a piece of shit. That's all there is to it.
Cool.
First off, he practically...
It's a la piece of shit.
He is...
It's French.
Le piece of shit. He practically tricks Guy into marrying his daughter. Jean got way more in the deal than Guy did, because again, this is a time when marriage was not for love. It was for, I'll give you a piece of land and 3 cattle if you give me your daughter. You know, which is pretty much what it was. Jean got so much more, got so much more in the deal than Guy did. Then, when he got custody of his grandsons, he did it with the sole purpose of expanding his own territory and power. The book I read goes on and on about, he actually did love them. He just didn't know what to do with it. No, I don't think he loved these boys at all. I don't think he gave 2 shits about his grandchildren. He pretty much ignored them and let them get away with anything they wanted, bending to whatever whim they had. Quote, tutelage so lax as to be almost negligible, de Cran abandoned Gilles to the lackness and the disorder of childhood. Gilles and Renee could not have found a worse mentor. Everything we know suggests that de Cran was little better than a bandit. He taught Gilles to believe himself above the law. It also says in the book that de Cran used to be a river pirate, for fuck's sake. So, on the Lorry. So he really is just a piece of shit, and Gilles will get a lot of his bad characteristics from him. Either
so
learned
this is basically gone from Game of Thrones to Oliver Twist now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So this lack of supervision and discipline may have led to the horrors Gilles will allegedly commit years later. In fact, at his trial, Gilles will assert that the freedom to, quote, do as he pleased and had taken pleasure in all illicit acts will have a big impact on him and make him do what he does. He blames everything on his grandfather's upbringing, but you can't.
Boundaries, kids.
Yeah. Boundaries are great, but don't be a fucking asshole.
Yeah, well, that's why we teach kids things and we parent. You know, it's not because we want to be a dick. It's because we don't want you to be serial killers. You know, we don't want to be the cause or the blame. We don't want to be people to turn around on a podcast 600 years, 700 years later and be like, yeah, so Dan became stepfather to this kid and he's a right asshole. So that kid became a serial killer. No, that kid became a serial killer because of his own volition. Nothing to do with me. Just throwing it out there now.
Yeah.
Just in case it happens.
So not long after Jean took control of his grandsons, Gilles started military and night training. He was anywhere between 9 and 12 years old, probably closer to 12 than 9. He would train for about 3 years until he was sent out to be a squire. He learned to ride, fence, and fight with all types of weapons, and he loved it. Now, whether you believe in his later crimes or not, the truth is he had a certain bloodlust on the battlefield, and he was good at it. I mean, he's not the best like general or warrior or anything like that. He never becomes the most experienced, but when he's out there fighting, he's a sight to be seen. He becomes very large. He's a fairly large man for the time, supposed to be very good looking. If you're looking up, I'll just tell you now, if you look up photos, pictures, portraits of Gilles de Rais, you are not looking at Gilles de Rais because there is
going to.
He's not a very good looking person when you look at him, but there is no description anywhere in history that any historian has been able to find that describes to you what Gilles de Rais looks like, except for he was broad-shouldered, large, and good-looking. That's it.
All right. Ham-fisted, barrel-chested.
Yeah, something
those good.
But so you kind of take the portrait, and that portrait that everybody knows, that if you know of Gilles de Rais that you've seen, that portrait was made in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. All right, so 300 to 400 years after his death, this thing was painted. So,
right,
just what you see of Gilles
From
de Rais.
eyewitness accounts, no less, I assume.
So it was around this time that, in his youth, that he allegedly discovered his own homosexuality. Someone of importance, either his nurse or Jean himself, found him one day, quote, all too elegantly unbuttoned in the presence of a page. So pretty much fucking the stable boy. They walked in on fucking the stable boy. So
yeah, all too unpleasantly unbuttoned.
In the presence of a page. Yes. I mean, again,
that's such a
1400s. I don't know.
ye old English is a mouthful.
Ye old French.
Ye old mouthful. He's having a ye old mouthful.
Got to. Damn it, you got to it before I could. I hate it when somebody says a pun before I can. God damn it. Oh, it's good. Okay, so at the age of 16, or around there, Jean decided it was time for young Gil to get married. Pretty customary back then. So a few females were chosen over time. One of them actually being a 4-year-old girl. They weren't going to get married then. They were going to wait for the girl to become of age, so like 13 or something like that.
I was going to say 12, knowing the days back then, yeah.
But
so fucked up.
I think it was like 2 or 3 of them he was supposed to marry. They all ended up dying. You know, as you do in the 15th century, you just die. You wake up,
sneeze, you're dead.
Yeah, you wake up one day and you go, and you fall over dead.
What did he die of the 1400s?
How did he die? It was back then. Okay.
Yeah, back in the old day. Yeah.
So Jean found a 16-year-old girl, better, by the name of Catherine de Thros, which I'm probably butchering her last name, but it doesn't matter. She's dead too. She lived in an adjacent property.
I'd hope so. At this stage. I was going to say. So you obviously it's like, oh, we finally got a 16-year-old. She's too old, but she's alive.
Yeah. So
she got a pulse.
She lived in an adjacent property to the one that Gil would inherit. It would seem like a good fit. Same age, live next to one another. Gil would then double the area he would own later in life. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Except for the one problem, it's just a small one. They were related.
Never seems to be a problem in any of these stories.
Well, they were cousins, and though distant, actually it was forbade by the church to marry a distant cousin back then.
Really?
Yes.
That's funny because you're allowed to now, even direct cousins.
Yeah, depending on what state you live
legally
in.
allowed. Yeah, legally you're allowed to. So
yeah, the church would, and they were like, well, it was first cousins, but they were like first cousins 4 times removed or something like that. So, I mean, it was your great aunt's daughter's daughter or something like that. So, I mean, for the time, it seems like that would be enough distance for them, especially since kings and queens were brother and sister practically half the time. But no, the church...
Back to the Targaryens.
Yeah, the church would not sign off on it. They're like, no relation. And Catherine's parents were not allowed to sign off on the deal. So, Jean, doing the only thing you could really do in these instances, kidnapped the girl and forced her to marry Gil anyway. Which, I mean, yeah. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Gil and a few guys go to the house or to the castle or to the land or whatever, find her out riding, and they're like, hey, come here. They grab her and they take her away. So if you believe the stories, she was then raped also, as to spoil her marketability so that Gil would be her best and possibly only option for marriage. It's like, oh, she's a beautiful girl. I'd love to marry her. Oh, well, she's been raped. Oh, then no.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you're meant to be a virgin when you get married back then.
Yeah.
See, that's stand up in court these days.
So they were married in a small chapel, away from the prying eyes of the church. The church found out and nullified the union, but about 2 years later, due to Jean's protesting and paperwork and all this stuff, they went ahead and said, okay, you go ahead and get married. It's fine. It's official. So now they were married. There is no record, however, on how Catherine felt about any of this. It's like, how'd you feel about getting kidnapped and raped? Nobody cared.
I was going to say, considering the fact that they felt the need to actually have to kidnap her.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that she was not exactly too into it.
Yeah. And usually when back then when you'd get married, you pop out kids, boom, 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 real quick, get those heirs out. They didn't have a child, a daughter, for almost 9 years, and it would be their only child together. Again, Gil was he was obviously homosexual. I mean, he obviously was. The only reason he did it was for the pomp and circumstance of it. He had no, and honestly, this little bit right here I'm telling you now is going to be the last you are going to hear really of Catherine and their daughter. They played no role.
Sound like she didn't do anything for 9 years. So
they have no role in his life pretty much at all. At some point, they just kind of go their separate ways. They're still married, but they go their separate ways and live in different castles and all that stuff. She will have, just like his brother and his parents, have no bearing on the rest of his life.
All right,
but let's hold on a second and just touch on horrible Jean de Cran was. So, during the time that Gil and Catherine's marriage was being annulled and disputed, Catherine's mother, Beatrice, had become a widow. Now, Beatrice held the possession of Catherine's dowry, the land that Jean wanted so badly, and would not give it up until the proper documents of the marriage went through, which is, what you do.
Yeah.
She decided that she needed protection and married a young knight. Again, it's what you would do. So this meant that there was a possibility of an heir, and that would complicate things as far as Catherine and Gil's inheritance went. If there's a male heir, he kind of jumps the line.
Yeah, so basically he got them to marry off the daughter in order for them to inherit the family stuff. And now, so your ones had to go out and find this young buck of a knight. And so, I see where this is going.
Well, I don't know if you do or not, because I didn't see where this is going. Kind of takes a turn. So this wouldn't all fly for old Jean. So what he did is, again, what anyone would obviously do. He waited for Beatrice's new husband to leave the home, and he kidnapped her. It seems to be a running theme.
Okay.
He told the jailer that watched over her to keep her hungry for several days. And when she was half dead with thirst, Jean paid her a visit and explained to her what was going on. He wanted her to renounce her rights to the land. She refused because she thought without the castle, her new husband would leave her. So Jean had her sewn into a leather sack, taken down to the banks of the Loire, and threatened to drown her.
This is the grandfather, yeah?
Yeah, this is the grandfather.
Yeah.
The river pirate.
God.
She was dipped in the water for a while. Again, for all the Loire is the river that kind of runs through the northern central part of France. She was dipped in for a while, long enough to leave her coughing for air when she came up. Her husband found out, and instead of marching over there and taking his wife back, he sent some messengers to talk to Jean. They were also thrown in prison cells
with a thank you card.
He's like, "Come on, man, can just send her back." And he's like, he literally, he took the messengers, threw them in prison cells of their own, left them there. And then eventually he just said, fuck it, went and took possession of the castle himself anyway. They were super rich. They had their own army, so they could pretty much do whatever they want. And that's what he did.
She's still lying there in a sack on the side of the river.
He lets them all go. No, they didn't die. But, Jean was fined, but he shrugged it off. And again, this was showing his grandson that they were just above the law.
He was fined. I'm sorry. So he kidnaps a woman. Yep. Ties her up in a sack, drowns her basically, and like waterboards her like 1400 style, right? It basically false imprisons and kidnaps messengers, and then just says, "Ah, fuck this!" Walks into somebody's house and just puts his feet up and goes, "That's mine now." And just like, oh, finger wag. No, Jean, you can't be doing that. There is a guy, whichever one of them it is. You can't be doing that now. And he's like, oh, sorry, guys. Oh, sorry about that. On with yourself.
Yes, pretty much. He gets a ticket in the mail saying you owe us
with that sort
$50.
of thing.
Well, but see, okay, so if it was any other family, they might have been arrested, tried, and hanged. Who knows? But the de Rais family. And it's again, the names are right. He was D means of, and Ray is an area of France. So he was Gilles of Rais. So Gilles de Rais. And he was Jean de Cran. Cran is area of France. So he was Jean of Cran. They were extremely important. They're not going to be thrown in prison. They had more money than the fucking king. And there wasn't really even a king then. There was a dauphin, somebody who was supposed to be king, but because the English controlled half of France at the time, there wasn't a king yet. So he needed them. So they couldn't really, and the Duke of Brittany at the time, couldn't really do anything to him. So they just sent him a fine, and he's like, fuck it. But again, this was just showing Gil that I don't have to listen to fucking anybody. I can do whatever the fuck I want. So let's get back to Gil. Gil would go off to fight against the English, and some of the French, the people from Burgundy, kind of sided with the English. That's and they swore loyalty to the English instead. So he would fight them as well. But in his late teens, early 20s, and by all accounts, this was Gil's happiest time in his entire life. He fucking loved it. He was able to quench his bloodthirst without being regarded as bloodthirsty. I mean, it worked fucking perfectly. Some people felt he may go a little too far sometimes. So selling off your POWs back then, back to their homeland, was pretty standard and lucrative business. Gil took advantage of it. And he made a significant amount
of them.
Yeah, he made a significant amount of money doing it. You capture all these English, sell them back to England. I mean, he made good money. But not with the, as he saw it, traitorish Frenchmen. They were hanged. Like, you're English, I'm going to sell you back. You're French, you're going to fucking die. And a lot of people were not happy about that, but that's just the way it went. So enter Joan of Arc. Oh, yes, everybody's favorite heroine.
Everybody knows Joan.
Yeah, so if you don't know the story of Joan, I'm not going to get into it. Go look it up.
Search fucking life out.
Yeah.
There's several films. There's lots and lots and lots of things. I don't even know everything about it.
Yeah, documentaries.
Most people, I'm pretty sure, know enough about it.
She was a schizo that heard voices, thought it was God, and decided to fight in the military. There you go. I figured it out for you. So in February 1429, Jeanne d'Arc, or Jeanne d'Arc, or however you want to pronounce her name, it's what she was originally called, came to meet the would-be king, Charles, in Chinon. Again, would-be king, he was technically, quote, a dauphin, so not technically king yet. And it's said that at this meeting, Gil was one of those present in the court. Some say that they wanted to see if she actually knew who Charles was, so they had Gil sit on the throne and look all princely, and she was still able to tell that Charles was the real dauphin, not Gil.
Right.
But that's just a fun story. Now, there's a lot of historians that like to say a lot of different things about how Gil felt about Joan. Some say he fell immediately in love. More than likely, he saw her as a very good friend, which they became very good friends. He became almost like her bodyguard, even though she will be that one friend you have that's constantly fucking shit up, and then you have to go save it. You got to go save them. Yeah. You got to go pull their ass out of the fire, and you're like, Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry. So he's not the fuck up in this relationship.
No, okay. He's not the fuck up. Well, not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and then during their relationship, he doesn't fuck up. She really just kind of. Okay, so Joan wants to save Orleans from the English. What the New Orleans here in America is named after Orleans in France. Even though the English presence there was very strong and the French would be outnumbered, and there are a lot of, I'm not going to get too much into the 100 Years' War. There's a lot of politicking going on, but honestly, there's a lot of major generals and dukes or whatever that wanted to control the French military, so none of them were on the same page, so it meant that the French military was just shit at the time. But Joan wanted to take back, God told her to take back Orleans. That's a myth that Joan was in command of any of the armies. Like, Joan, they gave her command of the armies. No, they fucking didn't. She was just kind of there as a figurehead. All right.
Yeah.
Gil was.
You see, as far as I remember, in some of the movies, whatever, it has her as if she's
Yeah, she's pretty much
leader.
queen regent of the fucking place. Like that's not how it went.
Yeah.
In fact,
that's it's just the way they tend to do it. Those
it's movies. You got to sensationalize everything.
Yeah.
The fact was, Gil was actually the one in charge of the army that would take Joan to Orleans to try to win it back. She would sometimes lead small groups of men, usually ragtag groups, sometimes even just the citizens of Orleans when they got in there, just like, come on, fight with me. And they're like, yay, a woman. And she's like, yay. But
God talks to me.
But she never, ever led the entire army.
Why would you let the nut job lead the entire army?
In all honesty.
She's sitting there and she's like walking into the French military. That's where I saw Leprechaun. He told me to burn things. They're like, give this woman an army.
I saw a bright light and I heard voices. I think you had a stroke. I think you have I think you need an MRI. So, in all honesty, people are like, she's one of the greatest military minds to ever live. No, she was she had no great military mind. She was horrible when it came to having a military mind. Because here's how it is. She thought, well, I can't die. God won't let me die until I finish what he wants me to do. So, I should just run in there with my sword and start chopping people down. Which, if you can't die, that's fine for you. But what about all the people behind you that can?
Yeah. And sorry, getting tongue-tied at that stupidity.
So, no strategy to what she was doing. She did the exact opposite of what they needed to do. But her saving grace was Gilles de Rais. Time after time, he came to her aid. Once Joan took hit by an arrow in the shoulder, Gil was the one who grabbed her and carried her off to seek medical attention. It's a wound that should have incapacitated a person, but it didn't stop her. Again, I will give her credit. She does not quit. So she actually gets up, returns to the battle. It inspires the French fighters, and they go into a frenzy, and they actually push the English back, and they win back Orleans. And she gets a lot of the credit because she was there. She was an inspiration to the men. So you can give her credit for that, for being an inspiration. But as far as a fighter, a military leader, she was shit. All right? That's just the way it is. I don't know what to fucking tell you people. It's how it is. All right?
She's basically a human war cry, in a sense. Like, she bolstered.
She's the figurehead. She's the drummer boy. She's, whatever you want to call her. She's that's what she was. She's, there's Jean, let's fight for her. Or Joan, let's fight for her. All right? That's all right. And the thing was, this win in Orleans, it meant nothing. It meant nothing. Orleans was on the very edge of English control, between where the English and French line was. English owned everything north of Orleans still. Yeah. This was a very small victory.
But if you think about it, did that not then inspire Nolans? Then the fact that he took it back, so there's something.
And then you get the baby and the king cake and Mardi Gras and everything. So this win was symbolic. It was a place they wanted to take back, and they got it back. It showed them that maybe they could fight the English back. So Joan goes back and urges Charles to go get properly crowned as king. A few more battles were won, and Charles actually does go to Reims and gets crowned as king. And on that same day, Gil would be named Marshal of France for his support of the king. Now, again, it's not because he was the greatest or the most experienced warrior. He was a great warrior. He wasn't the greatest. He wasn't the greatest military mind. But he was the wealthiest. And he would not hesitate to spend his money on Charles. So, I mean, it's pretty much just an honorary position. It's like giving an actor a doctorate in something because you want them to come speak at your school. Pretty much.
Oh, yeah, an honorary fucking bullshit. Yeah.
So they fight some more fights, and then they try to take Paris, and they lose at Paris pretty embarrassingly. And Joan would actually become more of an embarrassment to the crown than anything, because Charles, look, King Charles, is a weak, spindly, weaselly little man who could never make a decision on his own. He was a pissant.
He seems to be doing an okay job so far.
Yeah, but he wants to negotiate with the English rather than fight them.
Yeah.
So he disbands the army, leaving Gil without his outlet for violence, and pretty much pissing off Joan. Joan didn't want peace. God told her to fight for France, not to negotiate for France. So she was all, no, let's fight. And she was always wanting to fight. She fought in all these other battles, and she was not doing well, and she ends up getting captured. She goes from like castle to castle or whatever. One time she even tried to jump out the window of a dungeon and lands in a moat that had been drained. So she pretty much just breaks her body.
Oh my
and they
God.
they grab her, carry her back in, throw her back in the dungeon. Eventually eventually, it's like the other guys, the movie with Will Ferrell and
they jump off the roof.
Rock
The Rock.
and Samuel L. Jackson through. They just go hit the ground. Yeah, pretty much that.
Oh, yeah.
Except she didn't
Lovely.
die. Well, eventually she's sold to the English. She's tried, burned at the stake. About a year later, Jeanne de Cran.
She what? I
Oh,
did
you
not
didn't know
that she got burned at the
spoilers,
stake.
I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
You ever heard the Three Stooges? I think it was Curly. So I'd much rather be burned than have my head cut off. And they said, why? He's like, well, I'd much rather have a hot steak than a cold chop.
God. It's ridiculous.
Fucking Three Stooges. So about a year after Joan was killed, Jeanne de Cran would also pass. And we don't really know how Gil handled all this news, but it is known that around this time is when he began to become more publicly unhinged. And we'll see one of the richest men in France, even more than the king, lose it all. So again, I keep beating this in. Gil was incredibly rich. He was rich enough to have his own army, plus spies and scouts to keep track of enemy movements. He supplied them, armored them, paid all these men from his own pocket. In money alone, now again, this is 1400s time money, but in money alone, his annual income surpassed 2.5 million francs a year. His capital was 4.5 million, not to mention his art collections, books, furnishings, and tapestries. He owned about 6 castles all around Brittany, Poitou, and Anjou, not to mention his keeps, entire villages that he owned that he got tax money. I mean, he the motherfucker was stacked, all right? So what do you do when you have money?
French Elon Musk.
You shoot a rocket into the air with your car on it for no fucking reason. You spend that money. And he spent a lot of it. All the time.
On what? Like, it's not like...
Okay, so the stupidest shit you can think of. And when I say that, you're thinking, oh, what? No, trust me. When I start telling you about the stuff he spent his money on, how he wastes his money, you're gonna be so
Beanie Babies.
angry.
Beanie Babies.
So for one, he would just give it away. He'd see people on the street need money, are friends or beggars or whatever. He would just give it away. But I mean, how much money can you actually give away when you have millions upon millions of francs? How much can you really give away until you're broke? Okay. He would constantly, again, he had 6 castles. He had like 24 properties in all with his keeps, castles, and villages. But he liked to go around to all 6 of his castles, move around constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he went
all
to
those
one,
fuel costs.
Yeah.
That's all that diesel.
Every time he would go to one, it would be pretty much like an open house. People, nobility and commoners alike, would just come in whenever and grab food or drink. It was always cooked, always ready. The table was always set. It didn't matter who you were. If you're in the area, you just walk in, grab a bunch of food, some drinks, and walk out. He didn't give a fuck. And sometimes he gave away so much that he didn't even leave any food for himself. Again, people are thinking, oh, well, this is fucking great. This is how it's supposed to be. You feed the poor. Okay. He would give entire wardrobes of brand new custom-made clothing to random people for no reason and then go buy more. And I'm not talking like, a little wardrobe that's got like 30 or 40. I mean, hundreds of garments that he just had made. He would just give them away. of the finest cloth.
It wouldn't fit anybody else, surely.
I don't know.
Custom made.
If you're poor and you need
bespoke.
clothes, they're not gonna give a fuck if it fits. Nothing was
1400s
comfortable back then. Nothing that
George
anybody
Armani.
wore back then was comfortable. So I don't think they gave a shit.
That's true.
Now, even though he collected taxes from the people who lived in the villages and fees from merchants crossing his land, it wasn't enough to cover all of his expenses. He had millions of dollars. He had to borrow money. And a couple of years before Jean would die, he started purging some of the family estates. He sold a chateau in Blaison for an undisclosed yet seemingly small amount of money that Jean had to go back and buy at an inflated price to get it back into the family. And he has no idea what real estate is. He's selling massive estates and castles for like literally pennies on the franc, I guess it would be. I mean, he's selling them for nothing. Just to get, something that would probably be
coffers.
Yeah, something that would probably cost like 3 million francs. He's selling for like 100,000. He's way below market value.
Like to meet this guy.
Yeah. Oh, I know, right? And then that wasn't working out so much, so he started taking up banditing. So he'd get a group of men together, go out on the merchant trail, and start robbing from the rich. Not
Grab
giving
their
to the
pears of
poor.
anguish.
He was not Robin Hood. He wouldn't give it back to the poor. He kept it for himself. But not even the king's mother-in-law was safe. He kidnapped the king. He robbed the king's mother-in-law, and the king was like, she forgave him, and the king's like, what can you do? It's Gilles de Rais. What can you do? Boy's gonna be back. Again, gets away with
Classic Gil.
Classic Gil. Oh, that Gil of ours. But one of his biggest, not his biggest, we will get to his biggest expenditure here in a minute, but one of his biggest expenditures was the building of a grand chapel called the Chapel of Holy Innocents. He poured an enormous amount of money into construction and its ornamentation. He also employed about 50 people, including a dean, servants, choir boys, archdeacon, and a schoolmaster for the boys, all of which wore elaborate and expensive clothes designed by Gil himself. Now, it was as lavish as a cathedral without reference to the church authority. Again, this was not sanctioned by the church. This is just something he goes, I want a chapel. I'm going to build it. And that was that.
Yeah.
His family was so pissed off because they're like, you don't need to do this. You are wasting all of our money. He's the firstborn. It's his estate. But everybody else in his family, that's their money that he's wasting. That's their inheritance that he's literally shitting down the fucking tube. And
what would he care?
He doesn't. He does not give two fucks. Yeah. If he had a fuck to give, it left a long time ago. They went to the Pope, begged him to do something about it. The Pope refused to recognize the dean's position, said anything that him or the Archbishop or anybody does in your chapel, it doesn't mean anything. And Gil's like, fuck it. And he went ahead and just had them dress in their archdiocese clothes and robes and everything. He's like, we're going to do it anyway. Fuck you.
Starting his own religion.
So far, he should be a hero of yours, Dan, because he's pretty much telling the church, fuck off, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah. Well, he's telling them to fuck off, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
But then he's also saying, but we're going to go pray now.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. So he's halfway.
Yeah.
He's going to take a turn, however, and you're not going to like him anymore. Here real quick. But for now...
Who said I liked him to begin with? He's buddying up with Joan de Chart.
The title of the episode, Gilles de Rais, Dan's favorite person. For a little bit. Dan says he loves him.
I love his hair and his portrait. That's about it. Yeah.
Yes.
The supposed portrait.
The bangs. The bangs.
It's the Karen Bob.
Yes.
I think.
So, fighting begins again, the 100 Years' War, and Charles calls on Gil to raise his army, but Gil has no money to pay for it, so he has to go take out a large loan to pay for his army. But instead of going, which you would think he would, he sends Rene, his brother.
Right.
He's like, you go, here's the money for the army. You go take them. I have other things that I want to do. Between 1432 and 1433, by some accounts anyway, Gilles commits his first murder. Now, we cannot be 100% sure when or how it happened. We can only go by his confession and the confessions of those around him. But as we understand it, it started out like many serial killers, accidentally, or at least, quote unquote, accidentally. One night, again, this is just speculation, but one night, maybe he had a little bit too much to drink, which was becoming more and more common, and he snatched up one of his choir boys. At some point during the rape, which it's choir boy, he's underage boy. That's all it is. It doesn't matter if he says yes or not. It's still rape.
Yeah.
His violent nature kind of overtook him. Now, probably with strangulation, possibly with a dagger, but either way, he held the child as he died, watching the life drain from his eyes, and it gave him a feeling, as our reference material calls it, of a mystical experience that can only be induced by blood. Now, from what I could find, this would be about the tamest and most humane of all the killings. Children would allegedly start going missing left and right, especially in the vicinity of Gilles' castles and keeps. Now, Gilles didn't
Not suspect at all.
Yeah, Gilles didn't do this all on his own. His cousin Gilles de Celle, Roger de Briqueville, his servants Henriette Griart, and
what a name, Briqueville,
and Poitou helped him out in almost every aspect of Gilles' crimes.
What happened to Poi 1?
Very good. Poitou wasn't his real name. It was like a nickname. I don't have his real name. I have his real name, but I didn't put it in here because it's just easier to call him Poitou because he had a long fucking French name. So children going missing back in these days, it's obviously upsetting to the parents. But as for the town in a whole, it's really not. It wasn't uncommon for children of the town or wandering the roads to be picked up by the elite or by knights to come work or squire for them. To be offered a job. It wasn't. To be offered a job in the castle and never be seen again. Now, usually they would run home. Usually they would go and tell their parents, hey, I got a job in the castle or with a knight, goodbye. But not necessarily always. Sometimes, you'd be driving and see, hey, boy, do you one silver coin to come to my house and clean my pig shit. And they're like, oh, yes, sir. And they jump in and they go. And the next thing you know, they're like, how would you like to live here and marry my cow?
You just imagine, though, coming home from work. Hey, Marge, when's the kids? I don't know. Yeah. Really got a job in a castle. Shit. It's like,
yeah. The parents were obviously upset. The parents would obviously, want to know where their children were. But it wasn't outside the realm of possibility that your kid leaves the house one day and he never comes back and nothing bad actually happened to him. He got a job somewhere. Or he's squiring for a night.
You assume.
You want to think that. Or thieves or scoundrels would come grab him off the road and take him. I mean, that shit happened. It happened all the time.
That's what actually happened in Hansel and Gretel, you see, is he left them on the side of the road hoping a knight would come past and give them a job to pay their way. He wasn't such a bad father after all. He assumed they got a job, not that they've been taken by a witch.
You know what? That witch fed them for a long time. She fed them. All right. Now, she tried to kill them at the end, but still, they were well fed. Which is half of raising a child, is just making sure that they don't die from starvation.
That's true.
So the first documented murder that we know of happened, we say, again, quote unquote, know of, happened to a 12-year-old boy whose family name was Jourdan. He was the apprentice to a furrier named Hilaret. Later at Gilles' trial, Hilaret and his wife would testify that de Celle and Briqueville used the 12-year-old to, quote-unquote, run an errand. Later that day, when they were asked where their boy was, the two cousins just shrugged and suggested that the child had perhaps been taken by thieves, and the boy was never seen again. Hey, you know how you let my kid run you an errand for you? What happened to him? Oh yeah, probably, thieves. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Am I supposed to know who your kid is? What the fuck?
All I know is they turned around, he was there a woman, and turned around, he wasn't. What can I say?
Pretty much.
Maybe he got a job in the castle.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Another story of the son of a woman named Georgette. The boy and his father were not getting along, so he asked his mother for a share of a tiny inheritance, and he was given 1 silver mark, which he put in a small box that he carried with him to Gil's household. At some point, the box was returned to the parents, minus the child, or, and this is the kick in the pants, the silver mark. They took both. They didn't even give him the fucking silver back.
You sent the box back, which is probably worth more than the fucking silver.
Like, where's my son? Oh, I don't have him. Here's the box.
Well,
Ooh, where's the silver?
What's in the box?
So you may be wondering, how bad did these torture murders get? Well, I have a description from the 1971 biography of Gil from Jean Benedetti. Now, what I'm going to tell you is kind of hard to hear. I thought about putting like a little thing here. It's like, well, if you can't handle hearing this, skip forward. But if you're listening to this show, you know what you're getting into. So here
do with it, motherfuckers. Yeah. I have to. You have to.
So okay. The boy was pampered and dressed in better clothes than he had ever known. The evening began with a large meal and heavy drinking. The boy was drinking too. The boy was then taken to an upper room to which only Gil and his immediate circle were admitted. There he was confronted with the true nature of his situation. The shock thus produced on the boy was an initial source of pleasure for Gil. Gil would then strip the child naked and hang him with ropes from a hook to prevent him from crying out. Then masturbated upon the child's belly or thighs. If the victim was a boy, which he almost always was, he would touch his genitals and buttocks. Taking the victim down, Gil comforted the child and assured him he only wanted to play with him. Gil then either killed the child himself or had the child killed by his cousins, Decille, or Poitou, or Henriette. The victims were killed by decapitation, cutting of their throats, dismemberment, or breaking of their necks with a stick. A short, thick, double-edged sword called a brockmard was kept at hand for the murders. Gil sometimes sexually abused the victims before wounding them, and at other times after the victim had been slashed in the throat or decapitated. When the children were dead, he kissed them, and those who had the most handsome limbs and heads were held up to admire them, and had their bodies cruelly cut open, and took delight at the sight of their inner organs. And very often, when the children were dying, he sat on their stomachs and took pleasure in seeing them die, and laughed.
This is one of those moments where I wish Phil was here. He'd understand my nausea right now. That's all.
I told you it's hard to listen to. It is.
And I remember like I was saying in our last episode about the guy handcuffing the kid to the radiator and the cheese grater and all that stuff, and how angry I actually got listening to it. Like, it's just that sort of stuff just really.
You say, well, how can you read this and listen to this all the time? It's like, well, because it was 500 years ago. It was
I thought you would say it was funny there for a second.
No, this is not funny. It's not funny. No. And about that comment, Leslie, the story isn't funny. We are funny.
We try to add that.
We try. We go out of our way to be funny.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, we go out of our way to be funny to cut through all the bullshit. So Poitou and Henriette would burn the bodies in the fireplace in Gil's rooms. The clothes of the victim would be placed onto the fireplace piece by piece.
Smelled lovely, you'd say.
Well, they did this slowly over time, so the smell would be minimized. Ashes.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, ashes were then.
It smells like a burning body.
Which I can't think is going to be too far outside the realm of reality back then. Because I think kind of everything smelled like a burning body back in the 1400s
that's
in
right.
France.
Yeah.
I think things smell like burning bodies in France now, probably.
Yeah.
The ashes were thrown into a cesspit, a moat, or some other hiding place. Now, this isn't all Gil was doing. Well, while he was doing this, he was still squandering his wealth. Don't forget, he's still wasting away everything that he has.
So I have this picture in my head now of Gil standing there with a poor boy chained upside down and just with the dollar bills making it rain, dancing around.
It would be Frank, so he'd be shooting coins at his face.
Yeah. Bing, 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 bing.
We're fucking horrible. So in 14...
I want to try and get a caught in the ass crack.
In 1435, okay, when I say he spent his money on the stupidest shit possible, this is what I'm talking about. So in 1435, he set up a huge procession and traveled all the way to Orleans for his biggest waste of money, a glorified play. One that would be repeated several times over months. So the people of Orleans would celebrate the victory of Joan of Arc and the defeat of the English, but it was usually just a small thing. You go outside, you light one firecracker, boom, that's it. Okay, everybody go home. Gil, however, had other plans. The play would be a reenactment of the battle. 20,000 spoken lines with 140 speaking parts. With
Jesus.
500 extras.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
All of them required costumes, of which Gil insisted that each participant have a new custom-made costume for each performance. Not everybody gets a costume and you wear it each performance. Every performance, you get a new fucking costume.
God.
That's
That's just ridiculous.
Even when the costume was just supposed to be some beggar wearing rags, they would buy the most expensive cloth and tear it up to make it look like rags.
Hobo wearing Gucci.
That's exactly what he needs to be shoes on his feet, but they need to be all torn up. So, okay, let's get a pair of Yeezys and running through a fucking trash compactor.
Get some OG Air Jordans.
Yes.
Zoom.
That's what he was just wasting away money. And on top of that, scenes for all this shit also had to be built. All of these people needed lodging and food, and Gil paid for all of it. All of it. Usually you'd go get investors for this type of shit. Like, look at all the money we can make off this play. No, he paid for all of it. And investors wouldn't invest in any of it because the entrance fee to see the play was $0. It was fucking free. He just went out there and did it, and whoever saw it, saw it.
God's sake.
So to pay for all this, he sold almost all of his properties and took out gigantic loans. Needless to say, his relatives, not happy. Not happy at all. They actually went to the state and they're like, can we please stop him from spending all of our fucking money? And they're like, no. He's going to do it. I mean, no.
Think of all the money he's bringing into the local area, though, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's probably nothing, to be fair, because he's...
So after this, he was on the verge of absolute bankruptcy, and he was beginning to get desperate. He had stopped they had put a kind of a kibosh on the whole banditing thing, and so he had to stop doing that, so he wasn't getting all that banditing money, you know. But he was beginning to get desperate. Enter magic, alchemy, and the occult, which is, you know, the obvious place you would go for when you get desperate.
Yeah.
So not long after returning from Orleans, after the play was done, he met an imprisoned heretic that gave him a book of spells and rituals. Now, Gil hoped that he could get his fortune back by magic. He had a priest, Eustache Blanchette, He had him track down those who could convene with demons and spirits and hope that they could be convinced to return him to his vast fortune. Blanchette was also to find alchemists that claimed to turn average metals into gold and silver. Enter the Italian con man, Francois Preletti.
I was going to say Jesus. Okay. Middle Eastern con man, Jesus Christ.
Now, Preletti claimed to be an experienced alchemist and one that could summon the demons to do his bidding. It was 1439, and up until this point, Gilles' torture murders had been for sexual pleasure. Preletti taught Gilles how to link the murders with Satan, and he assured Gilles that only human sacrifice would prove his sincerity to the demons he wished to invoke. After that, hands, feet, heart, and other organs of boys would be brought into the invocation ceremonies, even keeping the hand and the heart of a young boy in a glass cup on his fireplace mantle in his room.
Okay.
Yeah. There's actually a little story about, so he had a lot of alchemists and a lot of soothsayers or whatever come to him, and they were all obviously phony. But when Preletti comes, for some reason, he is so suave and so charismatic. He gets Gil wrapped around his fucking finger. So what he does is he takes a bunch of fake gold and puts it in a room and closes the room, closes the door, but only leaves a little sliver so Gil can look in there. So they sit down, they convene with the demon, and he goes, "In that room, there is a pile of gold for you now." And Gil runs up and he's looking and he can see through the slit that there's this pile of gold. And he goes, "But you can't go in. Don't touch it yet. It's not ready." Gil, just being the fucking idiot that he is, goes, "Nah, fuck that." Opens up the door and runs in, starts grabbing the gold. He sees that it's all fake.
Classic Gil.
Preletti is so fucking debonair that he blames the demon instead of Preletti for the gold being fake.
Oh my god.
That is how wrapped around his fucking finger he is. He's
So
like,
this Preletti guy is kind of like nearly like the French Rasputin, almost.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, he's Italian, but he's living in France.
Sorry, Italian. Sorry,
yeah. But yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a real good way to put it. But yeah, Preletti just kind of, I mean, he's already committing the murders, but Preletti just kind of veers him off into this other direction that it's not good. So when Jean V, Duke of Brittany, it's a different Jean, not his grandpa, it's a different. Jean V, Duke of Brittany, heard the rumors about alchemy, the occult, and murder, he launched an investigation. Now, the rumors of magic and murder frightened Blanchette, the priest, and he ended up fleeing. He's like, "I don't want anything to do with this." But he knew a little bit too much. So like the mob, he's like, he knows too much, bring him back. So his servants go find Blanchette, bring him back, kind of hold him there against his will. Might be why Blanchette doesn't actually hang at the end of all this. Gil, at this point, is spiraling deep into depression and drink. His money woes and dealings with the devil, but never getting any actual results, was starting to take his toll. The idea that he was above the law never really left his mind. So a few weeks after Easter 1440, he decided that one of the castles he had sold a while ago, he wanted that back. So he was just going to take it. Yeah. He wasn't going to pay for it. He didn't have any money to pay for it. So he's just going to take it. Problem is, the owner of the castle is the treasurer for the Duke of Brittany, Jean V. The priest at the village church was the treasurer's brother, and he was holding on to the keys of the castle at the time because the treasurer was out of town. So Gil took about 60 men, went to the church, somehow got the priest to come outside, forced him to his knees, and told him, "Give me the keys, or we take your head." Obviously, he hands over the keys. Gil takes him, throws him in a prison cell. Again, just doing what his grandpa taught him. Gil then
lead
went
by example and all that.
Exactly.
Shit,
sometimes it's nurture over nature. So Gil kind of just goes and retakes the castle. He does exactly what his grandfather taught him. He just goes and takes the fucking castle. But again, the rightful owner.
Skipped the waterboarding this time though.
Yeah, he just it's a threat of decapitation.
It's like waterboarding.
Yeah. So, again, the thing is, the rightful owner of the castle is part of the Duke's court. And let's not get anything... Again, I didn't get into all the politics, but Jean V, Duke of Brittany, actually was kind of siding with the English during the 100 Years' War. He wasn't a big fan of King Charles. So, and he knew that Gilles fought for King Charles. So there really isn't any love lost between Jean V and Gilles de Rais. Jean V, again, he's kind of a piece of shit. We'll get to that in a little bit. So
they're all pieces of shit.
Pretty much. So what would the Duke do? He finds Gilles. But the problem is he finds him 50,000 francs, which is money that Gilles cannot come up with. This was done strategically. He's like, I'm not going to go in there and force him out. I'm just going to fine him, but I'm going to fine him so much he can't pay. It was meant to ruin him, and it worked. He was penniless.
This happens when you spend all your money on booze and
just stupid
kids
fucking
and
shit.
boats and jukeboxes and everything else that you spent this money on.
Having discos late at night and all that. I don't know what you're doing.
It's like, we didn't even need that goddamn bubble machine, Jules, but no, he's just like, no, I want it.
You bought all those fancy cheeses for Christmas. We didn't need any of them. It's ridiculous. Why buy so many cheeses for Christmas? So soon about this time, witnesses start coming forth to tell the court of the various crimes that Gilles had committed. It's getting to the point where people are coming forth and being like, listen, our kids are not here anymore. We have like an entire town of no children. And the last time they're being seen is with that motherfucker or with his cousins or his servants. There's something going on.
So yeah, last time we saw our kids, he said he's getting a job at the castle. Gil called us for a reference. And that's the last we ever heard.
At this point, there should be kids bursting out of the fucking castle. There's so many in there, but there's none. We don't see any of them. So the last recorded murder was of the son of Inot de Villeblanc and his wife, Macy. Point two paid to have a page's jacket made for the victim. And then so they're like, okay, yeah, take him, get him sized up so he can become a page. Then he was assaulted, murdered, and incinerated.
Yeah, he sized him up all right.
Yeah, pretty much. He was assaulted, murdered, and incinerated in August 1440. Now, this was the last of the murders because they arrested Gilles without incident the next month. Along with Gilles, they also took in Francois Preletti, the priest Eustace Blanchette, and his two servants, Poitou and Henriette. His cousins actually skipped town before the shit hit the fan, and they were never charged, even though they were in it just as much, if not more, than anybody else.
Right.
So, because, quote, the church has a fear of blood, Gilles would have two trials. One in the ecclesiastical court for his crimes against the faith, alchemy, demon, and summoning, and one by the secular court for his crimes against the state. Now, it should be stated that apparently they did everything they could to make sure these trials were fair. Every accusation, every charge were read publicly to him in the court in both Latin and French. His accusers were brought in front of him, and his accomplices.
Sure, Mr. Hero would appreciate that whole thing of being read in Latin. It's like, yeah. Thanks, boys. Thank you.
His accusers were brought in front of him, and his accomplices were called as witnesses. Nothing done behind closed doors, which was kind of weird back then. However, they did trick him. As we have discussed ad nauseum on this show, back in these days, you couldn't be tried for a crime without a plea, right? You just stood silent. They, maybe crush you or something, but they couldn't do anything until you gave them a plea. So when they arrested him, they told him you were being charged with murder, blah, 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 all this horrible thing. But when they get him into court, They only said you are being tried with heresy. So he's like, holy fuck, I'm getting out super easy. When they read the crime of heresy, he goes, yeah, fuck, guilty. Go ahead, do what you need to do.
Right.
But this meant that they could go ahead and start the trial. So on the 28th of September, 1440, Jean Boulin, who was of the Order of Preaching Friars, who participated as a member of the tribunal representing the Inquisition, heard witnesses telling of their losses. You have somebody from the fucking Inquisition come down. It's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
So people came in, started telling them about losing their children, them being taken and killed. A few days go by. On Saturday the 8th, Gilles appeared before the state court and was read his crimes: murder, perversions, violations of secular and ecclesiastic law. They asked him if he would take the oath to tell the truth, and Gilles said, no. Just like,
what?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
No.
No, I do not.
No.
Well, why not?
Go fuck yourself.
Because this is bullshit. No, just fuck you.
I didn't know you could do that. Keep that in mind, everybody. You could say no.
Can you imagine everybody sitting there? It's like he just says no, and they're like, "Well, this has never happened before. Anybody know how do we proceed from here?
The whole court just starts looking at like one another. It's like those memes.
My God, he said no. What do we do?
It's those memes where you're like, tell me where you'll be in 5 years. I'll have your job. They're all looking at you. Can he do that? I didn't know. Or can he
the one screaming at the cat. You know, it's like he's just sitting there like the cat like saying no. It's like, you can't say no.
You can't say that. No.
How do you
plead? No. So over the course of the next few days, Gilles' servants were questioned on the murder. They spoke how they acquired the children, how they disposed of the bodies and the ashes. They even spoke about how they got rid of the piles of bodies from castles that had been sold just hours before the new owners of these castles moved in. They're like, hey,
you kill a load of people, sell the house, get rid of the bodies.
Be like, hey, you two,
come
here.
That's like,
you know that castle I got.
That's very genius.
You know, like this castle I got over there. Yeah. Are there still bodies in it? Oh, yeah, stacked to the fucking roof. Yeah, I'm going to need you to do something about that.
Yeah.
Just sold the place. I think the property brothers are going to be there in about 20 minutes. So you got to get that shit out of there. The vans will be pulling up.
I can just imagine. I just got this image in my head of the property brothers now. They're showing up with the camera crew. And all you see in the background is like, hey, we bought this place sight and see, blah, 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 blah. And you see these guys just chucking bodies out the back.
You see two guys, one's got like the top of the kid, the other one's got the legs, and they're just like
just walking up
out the back, look over, and then keep walking. Jesus Christ. Fucking hell. Okay, so when asked to respond, Gilles lashed out, saying he would not respond and that the accusations were ludicrous. Funny story, I type out this in a Word document, and I typed up ludicrous, and it kept telling me it was misspelled. And
Please tell me it gave you the music.
When I would look to see why it was misspelled, it was because I didn't capitalize ludicrous. Because it's a proper noun.
Didn't put the K in there. He has a K, isn't he?
I don't know. It spelled ludicrous correctly, except it kept wanting me to capitalize it.
He doesn't use the K. Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Anyway, he would say that the judges had no authority over him and that they were thieves and rogues that took bribes, and he didn't have to answer their questions. And it was intolerable that he should be brought before them in the first place. He was told that he was in contempt of court and then excommunicated from the church. Now, that's a big deal back then. I mean, if you're a Catholic now, it's a big deal. But back then, that was huge. He appealed it.
You kind of have like no protection and everything. It goes to church and state were massively combined.
Yeah. Well, and plus,
the same thing.
Back then, you saw your soul was your last vestige for salvation. I mean, whatever you did on the earthly plane, as long as you go to heaven. But if you're excommunicated, technically, you can't get to heaven. So his appeal was denied. 2 days later, he apparently changed his mind. He recognized the authority of the court and admitted to the charges, except for the demon summoning. He's like, yeah, killed all the kids. I didn't summon no fucking demon.
That was that Italian guy.
Who do you think I am?
Yeah.
Now, no reason is given to why he all of a sudden changed his mind, but I imagine it was probably just poor legal advice.
Just the Spanish Inquisition guy. Nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition, you see. And he was shocked when he saw them there.
He's like,
and
he went, that's it.
Yeah. So he changed his mind immediately.
So
exactly what happened.
When more witnesses came forward, he again lashed out. He went back. He's like, nah, fuck. I didn't do any of this shit. So the prosecution decided that maybe the accused should be, quote, put to the question. And if you've been listening to this show, you know that means tortured for a confession. Story is Gil wasn't actually tortured. It was the sheer sight of the torture devices were enough to straighten him out and get a confession. Again, head crusher.
They brought out the little tiny door to put on his face. That's what they did. And they're like,
it's going to be so much pressure on my head.
Yeah.
Now, this is one of the reasons that some people think that none of this, or at least a good portion, is not true. We'll get to that at the end of the episode. The idea of a serial killer in those days couldn't even register in the minds of people. It wasn't a thing. The judge could not wrap his head around the thought of someone who would do these things for pleasure. So it's pretty much Phil Better on the stand. Just like, why? Why would you do it? Why? Sitting quietly for a few minutes and taking
podcasting mogul Phil Better. I cannot believe what's happening.
Sitting there quiet for a few minutes and taking a puff of a joint and being like, I don't get it, man. Yeah. The judge was sure the devil was making him do it. No matter how many times he asked Gil who was making him do it, Gil would always reply, no one. I did it because I wanted to. I was up to my, I was using my imagination and doing what I felt like doing. So Preletti was brought in front of the court and asked if the demons had made Gil do what he did. Preletti said that the only once was a hand, heart, and eyes of a boy brought to him to entice a demon forward, and it didn't work. Of course, it didn't fucking work.
I was gonna say, Preletti sounds like a New York detective. Hey, Preletti, trying to buck at him, Preletti.
So the number of children they have, quote unquote, evidence for is probably between 40 and 60. And that's stretching it. But some people bolster it up to 140 and even some between 600 and 800. Those numbers are laughable at best. If you look up Gilles de Rais, the first thing's going to come up between 140 and 180 children killed.
5,000 children.
I doubt it. If he killed any, it was in the double digits, probably between 40 and 60. They have hard evidence, they said, for 36, but then eyewitnesses said at another castle they saw them taking out 30 more bodies or some shit like that. But we'll say between 40 and 60.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, though, is to kind of bear in mind as well. So originally, I was thinking to myself, how the hell is there that many kids in that town that are going missing? But it's several towns.
Several towns, several castles, several keeps, all over this area of France. So it's not...
There must have been, like, no kids left at all in that entire region of France. Because if you look at medieval towns, like 3 houses and a castle.
When all the adults died, the country was dead. Because all the children were murdered. So the next day, after his non-torture, Gil confesses in front of the whole court, laying blame again on his laxed upbringing. He took no responsibility for what he did. He pretty much listen, I did what I did because I was brought up thinking I could do whatever I wanted. It's all my grandfather's fault. It's all my parents' fault.
Daddy issues.
It's the fault of everybody but me. And then he even tries to give parenting advice to the people at the court, like, make sure you discipline your kids so they don't act up like me. And all the parents are sitting there going, I can't discipline my kid. You fucking killed him.
Yeah, you just imagine he's sitting there and he's like, yeah, so I admit to the rape and murder and torture of all of these children. Stay in school, kids.
You think like Georgette stands up and she's like, you killed my kid, and she throws the box at him. And where's my silver mark, you dick?
Yeah.
So,
I demand recompense.
Gilles, Poitou, and Garat were found guilty and sentenced to hang. Now, Gilles had been excommunicated, but since he ended up cooperating with the court, they reinstated him back into the church, and they decided they would hang him, set him on fire, but only for a brief period, then remove him from the flames so he could be buried on holy ground. Poitou and Garat would not get the same type of treatment. So on Wednesday, the 26th of October, 1440, Gilles de Rais' hands were bound, a noose tied around his neck, and stood on the hanging stool. Below was a pile of timber for the fire. The hangman kicked the stool, and the torchbearer lit the timber. Gilles writhed and dangled, and his feet scorched. So apparently when they hung him, the fire was set underneath him at the same time. So while you're hanging, you're also catching on fire, which is
just slow cooking him.
Yeah, kind of a metal way to do it.
Yeah. Still getting off easy.
Yeah. Well, when he finished twitching, the flames were extinguished and his body was taken to be prepared for burial at Carmelite Church. Garat and Poitou were hanged, but their bodies were allowed to burn to ash. The Baron Marshal Gilles de Rais was dead by 11 o'clock at 36 years old. That is the horrid story of Gilles de Rais, quite possibly the world's first serial killer. Now, cannot end the episode without talking just real quick about those who believed he was innocent of all charges. I, for one, am not sure where I stand on his guilt. I kind of go back and forth, but a lot of people feel like he was railroaded. So much so that in 1992, in the French Senate, an informal retrial of Gilles de Rais took place with a jury of politicians, historians, and former ministers. And they acquitted Gilles de Rais of his crimes after hearing arguments of his rehabilitation. What that fucking means, I have no idea. How is he really rehabilitated? He was hanged, but whatever. Now, why, you may ask? Why do people think he's innocent? Well, for one, many people were upset by the things he was doing with his estate and his wealth, his brother, his wife, his daughter, even the king and Jean V. With him out of the way, especially after being found guilty of such horrible crimes, it would be easier to move on and get wealth and respect back to the name. The king was embarrassed to have had anything to do with him after he started squandering on his wealth and power. Plus, he was linked to Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was a known heretic. She was seen as an embarrassment, so he was seen as an embarrassment as well because they had a relationship. And Jean V, who was a piece of shit, wanted the entire Gilles de Rais estate. He wanted it for himself. But if he kept selling it off, it'd be almost impossible to get. Plus, it seems possibly that some of the kids that went missing never even existed. They were made up. A lot of kids who were unknown. Probably didn't, there's a good chance they never existed.
There's my child, Santa's little helper, gone.
Yeah. Some speculated that the witnesses, even his own servants and those in his inner circle, were paid off. Some think that maybe that's why his cousins weren't there, is because they gave testimony and took off.
So really what you have here, when you take away anything to do with the murders for a second, is like you have a Catholic gay man who has done plenty of stuff to piss off the most powerful body on earth. By not only joining up with a heretic, but basically starting his own church, really, as well, which annoyed the hell out of him.
Yeah.
Plus bringing shame to everybody because of the fact that they would have been so tightly interlinked with the Catholic Church as well.
Right.
The family would have been, because that's power, wealth, all that other stuff, all runs hand in hand with each other back in the day, especially in France. And he's annoying the living shit out of his family. Right. So I can see where that's going. Yeah.
And not to mention that most anyone will say anything to not be tortured. So you say, well, why would he confess to some stuff? I mean, if you know anything about this type of shit, you know that when somebody's going, might be tortured, there's nothing you can do. They're going to torture you until they get what they want. He knew he was going to be found guilty. He knew it. But if he wanted to be buried on church grounds and have his soul go to heaven, which is pretty much all he had left, he had to confess. He had to tell them what they wanted to hear. There's even a website called GilesDeRaisWasInnocent.com. And the lady who runs that, also wrote a book about it. I don't know if you need to make a big deal out of it now. It's been 500 years. If he was guilty, that's horrible. If he was innocent, he'd still be dead. He probably did shit that he deserved to die anyway. Who knows? But
at least the Wikipedia page get updated, though.
Yeah, sure. But there you go. He would no longer be on the list of serial killers before 1900 Wikipedia page, you see.
So
well, you people make up your minds as to what you believe.
This is like Making a Murderer 1400s edition on Netflix. That's what it is.
Do you think he did it? We'd like to thank In the Nick of Crime podcast for starting off the show. We'll have a link to their show in our show notes. Our reference material will also be there. We're on all the socials at TorturePod. Email us, torturepod@gmail.com. Rate and review us on Apple, like I asked. Please, please, please. Like, follow, subscribe, wherever you listen. Hint for our next episode, a dip to find a witch.
Oh,
wow.
Nice.
Uh-huh.
So, did you see we won an award?
I didn't. Oh, yes. Poopy Records.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, we won an official poopy. It wasn't fixed. It wasn't.
Is that what you're calling it? The official poopies?
Yes, they called the poopies. That's what the awards are called. Look at the post.
Oh, I saw it. I didn't see that you called them the poopies, but I saw the post with Rick. The Rick.
Yeah, and I said it. Yeah, the Rick. Yeah, I intentionally did it because of the whole thing of having a turd you could actually polish, because people polishing their trophies. So
that brings me. You say you call that the poop. That brings me to the question: is what do we call our listeners? Do we call them torturinos?
Torture. Or the torturettes.
Torturinos sounds like a Mexican dish. Let's go get some torturinos. Hey!
I don't know. We'll. I think we might have to let them decide it for themselves as well.
Yeah,
we can have a poll at some stage.
Yeah, we'll put a poll up on Twitter, even though we don't have a ton of followers on Twitter, or a poll or something on Instagram, or email us what you guys want to be called. It popped in my head a while back. Like, there's another show out there that has murderinos. Like, it'd be the torturinos, but I don't know how long ago. All right, well, we're running long, so let's get the fuck out of here. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Happy New Year. Be safe, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya!
Au revoir.
Oh, bye-bye.